This morning we're joined by Mike Schuett of TLAForms, who's going to be talking about turning spool files into full cover forms. And with that, I'm going to hand this off to Mike. Looking forward to hearing this myself, Mike. Please take it away.
All right. Can you see my screen there, John?
You're golden.
All right. Fantastic. All right. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for, or good morning in some parts of the world, I guess, out west. My name is Mike Schuett from TLAForms. TLAForms has been serving the IBM community since roughly 1983. So we've been in the business for a long time. We do multiple products. Two main products. One product is Barcode 400, which is for barcode labeling, where you print to thermal transfer printers. And our other product, which I'm going to show you today, is TLAForms, which turns your traditional standard IBM spool files into full color forms. There are a lot of different form solutions out on the market today, and I'm sure all of them are pretty good. But we feel that there's just not a form solution in the market space on IBM that offers the feature set that we offer for the price that we can also provide the software for. So what I'd like to do today is to kind of take you through an overview of our software. I'm going to show you a demonstration of how that software works, how easy it is to design a form, and then I'll point out some of the highlights at the end. As John mentioned, one of my colleagues is in the panel, so if you do have questions, please put those in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer those. And of course, you can always get in touch with us via our website at TLAForms.com. You'll easily find our number, chat room, stuff like that on our website. Forgive me for not having a camera today to show my face. I can assure you it's much better that we don't. And if you want an image to conjure up, maybe to make it look better, maybe think George Clooney, something like that. My wife wishes, but so anyway, let's get into the software and kind of, I'd like to give you a broad overview of how the software works. And then I'll take you into a demonstration part of it where we can actually get hands-on and see just how easy it is. So what TLAForms does is it takes traditional IBM spool files, like you see here, and we provide for you a design tool. The form designer that we use is what you see here on your screen, that allows you to take data from the IBM spool file, plug it into a new form design where you can use a myriad of fonts, full color, actions, conditioning, SQL, all those type features, and convert that spool file into a great looking full color form that you can then generate as a PDF or provide to your customers, print to any printer. We tout that there's no programming with our software, and this is one of the really cool features of it. So when you create a form and use data from your IBM spool file, once you've created that form, our monitor, which is a part of our software that runs on your Windows server, watches for your spool files to be produced. When that spool file gets produced, our TLAForms monitor takes your form, gets data from your spool file, and plugs that data into the new form that you created, and then generates your form for you. As I briefly mentioned, then you can print your form to any IBM printer, any network printer. You can even print to locally connected Windows printers. If you don't want to print, why not generate the form as a PDF? That PDF then can be saved anywhere on your network, and you can actually set it up to automatically email to anywhere you'd like. You can use the body of the email and decorate that. And again, I'm going to show you that here momentarily. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump into the software. And I'm going to give you the hands-on type demonstration here of how this actually works. I'm in our TLAForms designer now, and this is just the screen you get when you sign in. If I wanted to open an existing form, I would click on the Open Existing Form tab, and hopefully we can see, John, can you confirm that you see a list of forms that we have designed here, right?
We are golden, yes.
Okay, excellent. So if I wanted to edit an existing form, I could do that here. I'm going to close this, and again, we're going to create a brand new form. So I'll just click the new form button. And when you create a new form, you navigate to a specific output queue and a specific library on your IBM I so that we can locate a spool file within that output queue. I have a library out here that I'll navigate to called TLAForm, and inside of that, we have a couple of different output queues, the sample form and the sample 2. I'm going to choose the sample form, and here we have a spool file called invoice. And it's very common, you might have multiple spool files in this output queue. You could choose any spool file to create a form. They could even be different spool file names. In this case, I just cleared everything out so we could simplify it and make it easy to see. So I'll select the invoice and then click select. This is going to create a new form for me. It opens up our form designer, and this is where we'll actually design the form. Up in the top right-hand corner, you'll notice the form name is invoice, which is the default. And when I hover there, you'll see the specific information about the spool file that I've chosen, the output queue, the library, form type, and other attributes of the spool file. We could give it a description, and we also identify the actual output queue and library as well for the output queue. And this qualifies that form so that we know that we have one specific form designed for that specific spool file in that particular output queue. Now, we could start designing our form here. We could add barcodes, start to add text, draw boxes and circles and lines, add images. And as you work with the software, you sort of develop your own workflow. I tend to like to get into the spool file data so that I can start creating fields that I can use on the form. So to access the data from our spool file, we would go up to spool data in the menu and then field configuration. When I select field configuration, we actually display for you the spool file that we're using to create this form. And here we can create as many fields as we want that we can use on the form that we're about to design. You can always get into this, so you don't have to create all the fields up front. You can create a couple of fields now and then come back in later. You can access it at any point. So to create a field, let's say we want to create an invoice number field. I'm just going to click and drag to highlight that invoice number. And in the bottom right of the window, it gives me the create field options. And really, we just need to name our field, and I'll call it invoice pound. Also gives us some details for that we can manipulate the height or the width of the field. Right now it's fine the way I've created it, so I'll click save. And when I click save, it puts our field in the created fields list. Now this field's available to be placed on the form as text, as a barcode. You could actually even use it as an image, although the invoice number might not be a good example of that. But you can use it for a variety of things, including output properties, which we'll get to momentarily. So let's go ahead and just kind of create a few more fields here, and then we'll get into the design portion. You'll notice here that we have a page number, page 001. But you also notice in the top of this window where my cursor is, you have page 1 of 5. So where the cursor is hovering right now, this is the number of pages in the spool file itself. So the entire spool file has 5 pages in it. The page number in the spool file is the actual page number of the invoice. So it's page 1 of invoice 1. If I were to go to page 2, it would show me, if I were to go to page 2 of the spool file, that happens to be page 2 of invoice 1. If I go to page 3 of the spool file, we get a new invoice with page 1. And if I go to page 4, we go to invoice 3. So essentially we have 3 invoices in a single spool file. And this is important, the way that I'm going to design this form, but I'm going to create a field called page number. And I'm going to differentiate it by calling it the invoice dash page number. And save it. So now we have a couple of different fields, and each of these fields is a single line, like page number, like invoice number. Now we could come down to the Shift To field here, and we could click and drag to highlight that particular line. And that would work fine. We could call it maybe our ship to company. But for the sake of our demonstration here, what we could also do is click and drag to highlight all 4 lines here and call it ship to. So now we're creating a single field with 4 rows of data in it. When I click save, it creates that field for us. Now, you might wonder why I highlighted so far beyond the data that's here. Again, we've got multiple invoices in this spool file, so this data is likely to change. And one way that you can test for that or check it is with the field selected, I could go to page 2, which is the same company, but page 3, it'll change. My field's big enough. And if I go to the next invoice number in this spool file, that's good too. So that should be a long enough field to handle any data that comes through our spool file. We could do the same with our ship from. And I'll save that. And then we'll turn our attention to the detail section down here at the bottom. So a couple different ways you could go about this to create fields. You certainly could create a field for the individual row. We don't see that quite as often. In fact, we probably see it rarely, but it's certainly there if you need it. A common way to select data and create fields in detail sections is maybe to create a row of data. So then you could place each row on your form individually. So you could have a item number column, a description column, a quantity column, and so on. What I'd like to do for the sake of expediency, again, just click and drag and create one large field, and I'll call it detail. And click save. So now we have 5 or 6 fields in our created fields list. Now let's get to working with the label or the form itself and laying that form out how we'd like to see it. So I'm going to close our field configuration window. And now let's just add some text. To add text, we'll just click on the A button. And it comes up with all the text field properties you would expect with text. Fonts, point size, spacing. When we say spacing, that's talking about the leading. If you have a multi-line field, you can affect the leading. If the font has a bold or italic style, you'll see it there. You can also rotate your text, 0, 90 degrees, flip it upside down. You can color the text any color you'd like. You can also paint a background on your text. So you could have blue text with an orange background, something like that. Probably not the prettiest there. We also have actions, and I'll get to those momentarily, but we can put conditions on our fields. And you can also use a link for this particular entry, for this text entry. And that comes into play if someone's viewing the PDF version of our form. They could click on that, whatever text we put in here, and we could give them a link to go to a URL. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to select spool data because we're putting in text. We click spool data, and let's get the invoice number. So we just select the invoice number, click select field, and we get some edit codes. You can trim it left, trim it right, that remove the spaces, and or zero suppress if it's a numeric field. I'm not really going to use any of these throughout the presentation, so this will be kind of the last time I mentioned them. I'll skip through the edit codes each time from here on out. So when I click OK, it puts the syntax for the invoice number into our data field. So now our invoice number is ready to go, and that's spool file data. If I'd like, I can also put my cursor in front of that field, type in invoice pound, and let's go ahead and place it on our form. And there you go. So it's that easy. We could do the same with page number. So if I click to add text, I'll expand the font a little bit. This time I'm just going to type in page number up front. I'll click on spool data and we'll get the invoice page number. Select it. Again, no edit codes. And again, I can change these fonts, rotate if I'd like. If I click OK, I put that on my form, and it's that simple. Now, if we wanted to add a barcode to our form, and this is one of the nice features, it makes throwing barcodes on any of your forms really, really easy. So you don't have to manipulate those IBM printer files and using AFP, that kind of stuff, which makes it kind of difficult. To add a particular barcode, you could click on the Add Barcode button, and we give you a whole selection of all of the popular, the common barcodes from code 39 or code 3 of 9 to code 128, multiple versions of it, the EAN or the European Article Numbering, GS1, which most of you are probably familiar with, Interleave 2 of 5 is common, as well as the UPC and UPCA barcodes that you see on like grocery store products. With the barcode, I'm going to let that, by the way, set to code 39, just a very common barcode. You can affect the height of the barcode though. Right now it's set to 1/2 inch. We could increase or decrease that. You can affect the overall width of the barcode, determine whether human readable should print below the barcode or not. Again, you can rotate your barcode. You can apply actions, links, as I discussed earlier. And in the advanced section here, if a barcode has advanced properties like the code 39, you would see those here. If we were to go and select a code 128, the 128 does not have those properties, so you're not going to see those. So again, we go down to the data line. Now we choose the data that we want to put in our barcode. So with the cursor in the data line, I click on Spool Data, and let's encode our invoice number. I'll select the field, click OK, and we've put our barcode on our form. I'm not a big fan of the human readable below the barcode, so you can always double click on an object on your form to bring up the properties window, or with any object selected on the form or with focus, on the right here in the properties panel, you'll be able to manipulate that as well. So if I wanted to turn the human readable off, I could just choose false for the human readable and it disappears. So that easy. Now let's add a couple more text fields and sort of fill out this form to show you just how easy it is to design a fairly complex form. I mean, nothing crazy, but a nice form in just a matter of a few minutes. So I'm going to add text to our form. I'm going to click on Spool Data. This time I'm going to get the Ship To field. This will be this field here. I'm going to select that field. I'll increase my font size a little bit and click OK. And again, that's simple. Let's go ahead and do the Ship From. Now, one of the nice things that you would expect from a form designer, you can see how these are kind of staggered up and down. What you could do is you could click and hold Control and click again, or you could just click and drag to put both objects in focus. If I right click here, I can do an align and top, and they align those for me. So it makes it real easy when you're doing complex labels to align lots of data. So there we've got, we're starting to build it out. Let's go ahead and put our detail section on there. When you're doing a detail section, again, it's this big portion at the bottom. We don't want to use the way that I've created it, but I don't want to use a proportional font, because that font will make everything stagger. So I've got this big block of data. I want a monospace font. So I'm going to go ahead and choose Courier, expand my font a little bit, and place the data. So we've got the skeleton of our form set. Pretty easy. We're using a bunch of data from our spool file. And what we could do now is we could kind of dress up the form using boxes or circles, lines, and all of those can be different colors. One of the things you could do though, and I went and did this before we started our presentation today, is we can create templates. So for instance, I'll just kind of illustrate it here. If I scroll or click and drag to highlight all the objects here, I can right click and select Create a Template. And what that'll do is it'll store a template for you that you can insert into other forms. So if you have something complex, like a VIX bill of lading, for instance, or I don't know, maybe some checks, something like that, you could create a template for it that just has it stored in our software that you can insert at any point. And what I did before our presentation today is I went out there and I created a template that I can come in and insert here for you so that we don't have to go through drawing lines and boxes, which are pretty remedial for most of us. So I've got this template called A invoice temp. I'm going to select it, and it puts it right there on our form for us. Now, there are a couple different ways that we can use these templates. When I create this template, when I created it and saved the template, and when I just did the insert here, I inserted the template directly onto my form. And what that means is any of the pieces of this template I can edit. So I can edit the boxes here. For instance, if I wanted to change colors, I could come over and make these a little different color, maybe like a green, something like that. But the idea is that each object on the form is now editable. What you can also do, though, is you could use an overlay, or you could use the template as an overlay. And you would do that here in the form panel under overlays. You can use front overlays. You can also do a backside overlay. A lot of folks will use these as terms and conditions, for instance, maybe the VIX bill of lading on the front, terms and conditions on the back. When you use a template as an overlay, and it's as simple as just inserting, it's the same type of deal. The difference being, though, is that when you insert a template as an overlay, the template, the objects that make up that template are not editable, meaning I could not change the color from the blue to the green like I did here, and so on. You would actually have to change the template in order to change it on your form. So it gives you a couple different options and plenty of power to work with there. So again, we're kind of building this form. I mean, if I weren't talking so much, we'd have the form built in probably less than 5 or 6 minutes. A couple other features that you probably want to be aware of working with the forms is two-dimensional barcodes come standard with our package. We have two different barcode buttons. We have the linear barcode button, which is kind of the traditional barcode. And then we have our 2D barcode button. And the reason we break those apart is the two-dimensional barcodes tend to have very unique sets of properties that go along with them. So we differentiated those between the two. So we do PDF 417, QR code, data matrix, and maxi code. Maxi code is specific to UPS. So if you're doing any kind of UPS form and or labels, we have that capability for you. I'm going to select the QR code here, and it brings up the properties for the QR code. Just to make this simple, I'm not going to put any data in here, or spool file data, that is. A QR code can hold, I think it's 1,000 or 2,000 bytes of data. So you could put in quite a bit of information into this particular barcode. But one way that people use the QR code is to put in just a website. So I'll put in the TLAshford.com website. As with any of the objects in TLAForms, you have the different properties. In this one, you have error correction levels, the data mode, again, which is specific to the QR code. I'm not going to go into the details. It would just take too long. You can also affect the size of the barcode, and I'll play with that. I'm going to see how big that makes it. We can rotate it, and we could also assign a link and an action to that. I'm going to go ahead and place it on the form here and see what we get. So not a bad size for us. So there we have the QR code. One of the nice features of our software too that makes our software really easy to work with, and we think sort of differentiates our software from our competitors, is the ability to use images. And to use an image is very simple. We would just click on the Add Image button, and here we have a whole list of images that we currently have imported into the software. So we can import the image, and I've got a few out here. I'll select our new design TLAForms logo, click open. It shows me the image, and then I can go ahead and select it. But before I click select to place it on the form, notice that we can do variable images. So you can do an image for each individual customer if you'd like, or whatever your need might be. Product, part numbers, things like that, part drawings. And you would just select the variable image, and then the image name then could come from the spool file itself. It could come from an IBM file using SQL. We can reach out and grab that image name for you. So I'm going to go ahead and select it and place this on the form. And there we go. So we've designed a fairly nice form. I'm going to go ahead and save it. And bear with me here. I'm working from home today and VPNing, so it's taken a minute. John and I were joking. I think my son might be downstairs playing Call of Duty, so the connection speed is always questionable. So once our form saves, with TLAForms, you can easily use actions, which basically condition data on your form. And you don't have to be a programmer to do this. I think you're going to see here in just a moment just how simple it is to apply these actions. So let's say in this case, we want our barcode here on page 1, but we do not want it to show on page 2 of our invoice numbers or invoices. So we could create an action. And to create an action, you would go to Spool Data and Action Configuration. We have no actions configured, so I'll add one. And I'm going to call this action Show Barcode on page 1, because that's what we're going to do. Then I select the action. With the actions, you can show or hide objects. We can replace strings of data where you would identify a string of data, say asterisks. You see a lot of asterisks or hash marks in spool files. You could replace that string with blanks or something else if you'd like. We can clear lines. That is, if you see those asterisks or hash marks and you want to just clear them, you could use that to just remove it from the spool file data coming through onto the form. We can parse data. This might be handy if you're looking to get more efficient by using the TLAForms software to spend less money but have maybe some of the same features that other products out there might have. You can parse data on rows or within a spool file based on some criteria that you set. For instance, a code at the end of a line of the spool file might indicate that you have a detail line or a description line, something like that. So you can parse data based on that. You can remove lines, and we can enable and disable output. And I'll show you an example of that here shortly. For this case, again, we're showing the barcode only on page 1. So I'm going to show where my invoice page number is equal to, and we have not equal, contains, greater than, or less than, is equal to 001. And I'll save that. So we've created our action to show the barcode when our page number is equal to 001. So I'll close that, but then we have to apply that action to our barcode. So to do that, I'll double click the barcode and we come to our action section, the action property. And you can see the action that we just created is available to us. So I'll select it and click OK. So now we're on page 1 of invoice number 1. If I go to the next page, we're on page 2 of invoice 1, so the barcode disappears. The action takes place immediately. If I go to page 3 of our spool file, which is actually page 1 of invoice number 2, we see our barcode because it's page 1 of that invoice. When we go to the next page of the spool file, that's invoice number 3, page 1, so we see it. And if I go to page 2 of invoice 3, we don't see the barcode. Again, it's doing exactly what we said. We don't have to do any programming. We don't have to make any special accommodations. We just set up a quick, easy action to take care of that. Now, one thing here, and I'll show you another action. The blank line that you see in the address, this is a very common one. Again, you can easily create an action to manage that. So I'm going to come back up to our spool data and action configuration. And this time I'm just going to call it remove a blank line. So we're going to create an action called remove a blank line. I'm going to remove the line. If the row, and again, we're looking at a blank row in here. So if the row is equal to blanks, which is what we have here. So I'm not going to put anything in this particular field here because it's exactly what I want to look for. When there are blanks, remove the line. So I'll save that action. and close the action configuration window. And now we need to apply it to this particular field. And obviously we'd probably apply it to both of these, but I'm going to single click there to give it focus. If we come over to the properties panel, we can now see our remove blank line action. So we'll apply it to our field. Now, if we scroll through, I think it was invoice number 2. Yeah, it was this one, I believe. It had the blank row in it, and now it's gone. Right. So that's simple. There's no programming involved. As you can see, pretty much anybody could accomplish this. So that's really all there is to designing a form. Certainly you can do more complex forms, but all of the tools that I showed you here are what you'll use to create even the most complex forms. So with that said, let me jump back out. I want to show you a little bit of an action. Hopefully you're seeing the TLAForms logo on the screen there. And now I've gone to a page that says actions. If that's not showing, if somebody would let me know. So with actions, you can do different pages. Obviously, you're going to want page 1 to look maybe similar to what you see here on the screen, where you have your logo, your barcode in the top right, your header type of information, and a minimal number of detail lines in it. This is pretty common. And you can have a page 2 where you have a much more detailed or lengthy detail section. You can put signatures on that last page, and you can actually separate and move your totals, subtotals as well. So the actions give you a lot of flexibility to create as complex of a form as you need. Again, you can even use actions to enable and disable output, and I'll mention that again here momentarily. So with that said, how do we specify the output for our form? The form's designed, we've saved it. Now how do we output it? How do we determine the output? So to do that, we come to the tools in the menu bar and select advanced options. Under the advanced options, we have the PDF output, our email options, and printing. Let's start with PDF output. The PDF name that we create is going to be the name of our form. So you see invoice there. The form name is called invoice. But you could also use variable data to give it maybe a more descriptive name. For instance, in this case, we might put a dash, and then we could right click, and we could select spool data. We could use SQL if we had information in an IBM I file. You can even use a spool file attribute, form type, user data, tax, job name, number, etc. And those are the actual attributes from the spool file that we're using to design this form. In this case, I think it would be a good example to say invoice dash and maybe the invoice number. So we'll go back up to spool data, and then we'll just come in here and get the invoice number. And we'll select that field. Again, no editing codes. So now our file name, our PDF name, when we create this particular form is going to be called invoice dash, and I think it's 100,001. So it'll give the invoice and the invoice number. The path, we could just put it to home, or you can put it wherever you'd like, actually. Let's call it 2020 invoices. So our invoice number would be saved to a folder on our home directory called 2020-invoices. That too can be variable, which very likely would come in handy for you. These other properties, the title, author, subject, and keywords, I'm not going to get into much detail. These are relative to the PDF document itself. So they would maybe help you search through PDF documents or sort by author, stuff like that, give you keywords to search for within them. If we go down to the bottom, the output mode, we default to normal, but you can output this normal, turn it off so you don't output a PDF at all. But this is really what's called bursting, and what people refer to as bursting. So you could burst this spool file per page, which as we've described, we have 5 pages in the spool file, but we have 3 invoices. So per page wouldn't be a very good way to do it. More likely it would be to burst on the invoice number. So we would actually create, because we have 3 invoices in this spool file, anytime we saw the invoice number change, we would create a separate PDF for you. So you would have invoice-001, invoice-002, invoice-003. And we would put those in whatever directory you told us to put those in, and or email those if you specify that. So bursting gives you lots of options. Again, you can also select actions. We don't see the actions that we created in here because the actions that we've already created for the form are not applicable to the output mode. We would have to select or create an action to enable or disable output, but you can certainly do that. And a great example would be if you want to email your form and you use an SQL statement to go out to an IBM I file to search for an email address, say. If you find the email address, you email the form because you don't want to print it. But if you don't find an email address, you would want to print that form so that you can obviously have the printout for it. And again, I'll illustrate that here momentarily, but you can see the power in using actions to control that output to make it more effective and efficient. So we've set our PDF properties. Let's look at the printing properties. With TLAForms, you can print to IBM I printers, local Windows, and or network printers. This print services determines what printers will show. And I'm going to click refresh printers here, and again, hang with me. What we're doing here is we refresh these printers. The software is going out to the IBM I from which I'm working and locating all of the different printers that I have available to me. It's also searching our network to locate all of the network printers that I have available to me, as well as my local PC here on which I'm working. So it gives me all these options of printers to choose. So I can choose any of these from these IBM I printers to my Windows and network printers down here. Right, so if I selected this Canon, which is typically outside my office, even though I'm sitting in my my college son's bedroom at the moment, it would print this particular form to the Canon copier outside my office. We can also do variable printers. If I select variable printers, we can choose a printer from our spool file. And actually our spool file has a printer in there. So if I were to click spool file, I could highlight the printer here. And again, I'd probably want to get longer because we never know what the name is. And I could call that field spool printer and then select that field. And now the variable printer would be the printer that came through the spool file. So we can either determine a static printer or a variable printer. Again, the output mode refers to bursting. When you're printing, you don't really do a lot of bursting, but it could come into play in situations if, again, if you had to email versus print, stuff like that, where you would want to perhaps burst. And again, you can use actions to enable and disable output. The PostScript spool attributes here at the bottom. When we print to an IBM I printer, we'll actually create a new spool file to send to that printer. And you can actually manipulate the PostScript spool attributes on that new spool file if you wanted to save it and use it for some reason. And lastly, in terms of the output options would be the email. Email is a great way to show you how we can use SQL. We could just type in an email address here. I could put MikeG@TLAForms.com. And again, G is on our panel here, so he's answering questions for you. But we could also insert some SQL where we can look out in a file to search for an email address. And I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So if I right click in that field and I come down to insert SQL, we currently do not have an SQL statement configured. So I'm going to add one. And I'm going to call it get email. Now, when we create an SQL statement, we're looking for a library and a file. I have a library out here called custmast, $custmast, and in it, there's a file called custmaster. So what I want to look for is where the where the customer number in my file equals the customer number in my spool file. We did not create a a field for the customer number up front from the spool file. So if I click on spool data, we have the customer number right here. So I'm going to need to create a field for it. Again, you can kind of see how you can just create fields whenever you need them on the fly. If you know what you're going to use up front, great. And if not, you just create them as you need them and as it necessitates. So I'm going to call it cust # and save it, and then select it. Okay, so now what we're doing is we're looking in the $custmast library at the customer master file where the customer number in the file is equal to the customer number in my spool file. And when I find that, I'm going to return an email address. Now, that's basically all we need, but just a couple things to point out. You might have multiple records, right? You might find multiple instances of this SQL statement in that file. And if you wanted to email to multiple people, you could select multiple record and then use a delimiter, which for most applications is the semicolon. You could also use your own custom SQL statement. So you could paste in your select statement here to select specifically as you want from as many different files as you want and get as creative as you want in using SQL. For now though, I'm going to use just our standard setup and I'm going to save that. Now, once we save that SQL statement, one of the nice little tools that we have built in here is with that SQL statement selected, I can come down here and do a test on it. And when I test it, I can find that it found that customer number out in our customer master file and it has my email address attached to it. So that's what we want to do. We want to use this particular SQL statement to get the email addresses out in that file. So I select it, and now we've got the to address to Mike G, my colleague, as well as an SQL statement, which could be anybody's email in an IBM I file. You can do CCs and BCCs, and we ask that you do put a from address, and I'll put a subject of Summit RPG. Now, we could type into the body and say, you know, dear customer, and I could enter whatever information I wanted there. It would just type it out and send it as a text email. What you could also do though is use HTML. And I created a little bit of HTML here on the side, and I'll just copy and paste that in there. So it's just a little bit of HTML that says, it's got like TLAForms, thanks for attending the webinar. Some of the features, it puts a logo and some phone numbers and stuff at the bottom. So I'll show you here momentarily how this looks when it comes through, but it basically allows you to design your email however you'd like. By the way, you can also use spool data, use SQL to get data from files, or put spool file attributes within the body of your email. So now we've set up all of our options for output, and we'll go ahead and save them and save the form. So now we've created our form. We have defined the output options for the form. So then how do we make the form generate with no programming involved? I'm going to hop back, and actually before I go into that part of it, I want to illustrate the bursting thing where we have two different invoices in a spool file. When you burst those, it would actually come into two separate PDF files for you. And I mentioned the actions where you can email or print, and it would take 2 steps to do that. These are just the same SQL statements, and I'm going to create an action after this, but we could do an SQL just like what we created, right? Where we went out, we got the customer number, and we returned an email address. And then we could create an action that says print the form if there was no email address. Obviously, if we email it, we don't want to waste paper. We don't want to print it. So print the form if there's no email address. And what we do is we enable output on the printer when our get email SQL statement comes back blank. And when that happens, if we search the IBM I file and we get a hit on email, we email the form. If we search the IBM I file and we get back, get back blanks, then we'll go ahead and print the form. Okay, so now how do we generate the form with no programming? Because this is a big deal. You don't have to do anything. Everything we've done here requires hardly any tech skill whatsoever, really. What we have is a monitor. Our monitor runs on your Windows server, and it actually monitors output queues. So we just created our form called invoice from our output queue, sample form in the library TLA form. So our monitor, which is what you see here, this window, we are looking at that particular output queue where I'm kind of waving around my mouse there. So we're looking at that output queue. When spool files go ready in that output queue, the monitor here takes over. It goes out, it grabs data from that spool file, it plugs it into the form that we've created, and then it generates that form based on the output specifications and the output properties that we defined within the form. So I am going to pull our monitor on here, and I've got a cleaned up monitor. Usually you're going to have multiple output queues in here because you're going to be designing quite a few forms. So I've got our sample form monitor, and right now we're monitoring this output queue on the IBM I that I'm working on. One nice little tool, again, this runs on a Windows server typically. You can use scheduled tasks and jobs to kind of keep the monitor running. You can run multiple instances of the monitor. We also have a tool on the IBM I side that allows you to manage the monitor to keep good control of it. Right now, I'm just running this on my desktop so I can show you. So we're monitoring this output queue, and since I'm running it on my desktop, I can double click on the queue and I can bring down or show you the spool file. So it's seeing a single spool file right now in that output queue. And if I click on that and hold it, what I want you to do is I'm going to release this and make it go ready. So if you watch where my mouse is right here, when I release this spool file, the monitor on the bottom side here is going to go to work. It's actually going to take the data from the spool file and generate the form based on our output properties. So when I click release, you can see it go to work. It's generating the form. It's creating a PDF. It's also generating an email. Recall that I put an email address in there. And again, this stuff usually flies on something like this, but going through the VPN, we're doing a little bit slow here. So once this gets created and emailed, there goes the email. I can jump over to my email. I'll pull it on, and there's the email. I'll download the pictures, and so there we go. So there's the email that I sent with the HTML. Here's our invoice attached to that particular email. We did all that with no programming, and although I'm right at about an hour, you probably could have done this in 10 to 15 minutes, really, without all the talking. So I'll move that to the side, and I'll finish up here. Some of the features, again, plenty of software to choose from out there. Our software, our designers, it's modern, it's easy to use, it's intuitive. You can easily bring in graphics. Everything can be full color. You have the full complement of the two-dimensional barcodes. Using actions and SQL are just downright easy to do. You don't have to be a programmer to do it. Our software costs $2,995. And if there's one differentiating feature between us and everybody else, that's going to be it. We offer a feature set that rivals any other package on the market, and nobody can come close to meeting that price point. Our company's been in business for 36 years. We're reliable, we're trusted on the IBM I platform, and that's what we offer. With our software, there are no modules required. That is, if you want to email, it's all included. Printing's included, everything's included. The micro font checking, two-dimensional barcodes. You use your existing hardware, you use your existing email server. You can also have unlimited seats, as many people as you want to use that software. they can use it as long as they're on the IBM I for which it's licensed. Our yearly maintenance is $695. Our programming staff works on this product daily. Every day it's being updated. We're always talking to our customers and working with our customers to add features, to learn features that you need. And we're trying to build those into our package. So it's constantly improving. We provide all the templates that you saw there during the demonstration, from VIX BOL, W2s. We have a bunch of check templates that you can at least start from. Big box stores, NAFTA. We provide all those to you as just part of the service we provide, part of the deal. You have unlimited access to our tech support staff, which is, we're actually in Kentucky. We're just south of Cincinnati, Ohio, in the greater Cincinnati area. Everybody here works together. So you're going to get great technical support. You can contact us via phone, email, or always on online chat. And we have an extensive video training library out there that can make you an expert. You don't have to listen to me talk. You can go through those at your convenience to become an expert at our software. We're also always adding new videos to those to try to make your life as easy as possible. So with that, I want to say thank you very much for taking time out of your day. If you'd like to try our software, you can get a 30-day free trial package. You just go to TLAForms.com. You'll see the download a free trial button out there. You download the software. It's fully functional. You can be up in production within days. It's good for 30 days, and at that point, you know, we'll work with you, and hopefully you'll like the software enough to buy it. If you have any questions, again, please go to TLAForms.com. We're happy to help you. And again, thank you for taking your time. John, thank you very much for setting it up. You've been great to work with. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you very much, Mike. It was a terrific session. And this is one of those pieces of software where once I've seen it in action, I really wish I had a business need for it right now. I would love to play with this. Anyway, but Susan would tell you I have enough things that I play with anyway, so probably good that I don't have a really good reason to buy this. Anyway, it was really good to see it in action in a much more detailed fashion than I've been able to do before, and I'm sure everybody else enjoyed it. You've still got a few questions coming into the Q&A, I see, so we can keep this running just for a minute or two until we've been able to answer those. For those of you posing questions still now, if the mics don't manage to get an answer to you while the webinar is actually running, they will have your contact details will be in the Q&A, and so they will be able to respond to you directly.
And John, if I could add on.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt there. If I could add on that, if anybody does have questions, they can email me directly. And I apologize, I didn't put my email on the slide here, but my email address is Mike, S like Sam, @TLAForms.com.
Okay, thank you very much. And with that, then, I'm going to close the webinar. I will, before we go, though, point out to you, those of you who are registered for this, if you liked what you saw and would like to share this webinar with any of your colleagues, the recording will be available within 24 hours from the same link that you came in to register in the first place. So back on our Lunch and Learn webpage, what was a register for this webinar button will become a watch the recording button. So you can share this with your colleagues and they will get to see exactly the same demonstration, etc. that you saw. So with that, I would like to thank Mike for his time, and Mike G in the background, who's been frantically typing. He's answered 24 questions so far, I see, with another 25. He's typing his little brains out down there. Anyway, all right, guys, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, all of you who attended. Don't forget, there are more Lunch and Learn sessions next week, and we look forward to seeing you all there. Bye for now.